Yeah, great job, kiddo.
Thanks, Grandpa.
So, what's your 15-year plan?
Oh no, not this
Do
again.
you have a job yet?
Give me some time. Every time he comes over, he makes me feel like a kid again.
I don't know. Jobs seem hard.
Your estimated wait time is 97 minutes.
97 minutes? Come on! Alright, here it is. I pulled the MLS data on this luxurious short film, and it seems to be priced pretty appropriately according to the CMA, and depending on your DP, you may not even have to pay PMI.
Huh? Who's on the clock for steps? I just went. Bro.
It's not working. The only choices I have is a lion, wagon, and a zebra.
Sounds like you're gonna lose.
She really is beautiful.
Thank you.
Congratulations again. You got it from here, okay? All right, bye-bye.
Bye. Honey.
Sir, what's your number?
What number?
Next.
The test results are in. The diagnosis is rheumatoid arthritis.
What's a rumored artist? Excuse me? I thought refills on juice were free.
I'll go ask my manager.
Good. Adulting is hard.
I mean, adulting is hard at times, right? We've all been challenged to be an adult. In fact, I asked the question this week, what does it mean to be an adult? And I got some pretty fascinating responses. One individual messaged me back and said, I get to eat pasta all the time. It's true, you get to eat pasta. Another person, which I'm probably more on this side than the pasta side, I can eat ice cream anytime I want. I mean, pasta or ice cream, I'm more on the ice cream side, but there's hard struggles in eating ice cream all the time, right? Because, well, you know what eating ice cream 3 meals a day plus a midnight snack, anyway. But I had some other incredible responses. Hello, I had some other incredible responses. It's doing hard things. I was like, yeah, that sounds good. Being an adult means that you've got to wake up at an unreasonable time to go to a job that you really don't like. That's adulting. You know, when we talk about adulting is really it's a term that the internet coined to really give us some handles around doing things that adults do, like having health insurance, paying your bills on time, right? Going grocery shopping, making your bed, well, every other day, right? Eating vegetables. These are all things that are adultish, right? It's the art of being adulting. But you know, the fascinating thing is that oftentimes when it comes to adulting, it pits two things together. There's a responsibility that comes into play. It's saying no to one thing that you really think would be good because, well, let's be honest, you've got to say yes to something you really need. Like I heard of somebody that they had to say no to a vacation because they had to say yes to the air conditioner in their van. That's adulting, right? Like, do I want to go to the beach and sweat all day with like 4 windows down at 90 miles an hour? Or, man, we'll just give up the beach this year and we'll adult, right? Because I guess air conditioning is a valuable thing. It's getting up on a Tuesday morning when you had a 3-day weekend, right? I mean, adulting is a difficult thing. And for the purpose of this series, we're gonna give this definition to adulting. Adulting is ultimately the practice of behaving in a way characteristic of a responsible adult. Emphasis on responsible. Especially the accomplishments of mundane bills, taxes, but necessary tasks. Isn't it true that adulting is hard? And when you really think about it, adulting is hard. It's hard because you've got responsibility. You've got things you've got to do. You've got bills you've got to pay. You've got to do things. Or maybe you don't get fed. You don't feed your kids. You don't have electricity. There's things that have to happen that require you to be an adult. And oftentimes adulting is hard because it feels like that when we adult, it holds us back. When we adult, it tends to hold us back from being who we really want to be. Because, if we had it our way, we could do whatever we want. We could eat ice cream all the time and never go to the gym. Life would be good, right? For a limited period of time. Adulting holds us back so oftentimes because you've got to have the steady job because, well, you got to pay the bills. You can't sleep in all the time because, well, responsible people wake up and you keep, I just don't want to be an adult. But isn't it true that as we grew up, we kept saying, I can't wait to be an adult. I can't wait to move out. I can't wait to. And you insert there. We're constantly looking forward to the responsibility. But once we have it, what do we say? Oh my goodness, it's hard. Why? Because I've got to pay my bills on time. This isn't okay. I get a car. This is exciting. But you mean there's maintenance? I got to change the oil? Good news. There's a sticker. And if you add 3,000 miles to that sticker, you might be okay for a little while. You mean I got to rotate the tires? I got to shower regularly? I've got to brush. No, I don't have to floss. Really? Adulting is hard. But I agree. But but the cool thing is, when it comes to adulting, the crazy thing is this reality, is that most of these mundane responsibilities we can figure out with a little bit of time, a little bit of effort, maybe Google and a video or two on YouTube. We can figure out most of the tasks that come to adulting. But there's something still that's holding us back. There's something still that sits in the underneath that challenges us and makes it even harder to be an adult. I would even say this, it is often what lies beneath the surface of our adult hearts that keeps us from adulting well. It's what lies beneath. Yeah, these mundane tasks, they present trouble, responsibility, right? But it's what lies beneath. And what we're going to talk about today is we're going to answer the question, the who. Who? Who are you? Because oftentimes one of the hardest things when it comes to adulting is answering the question, who are you? A couple weeks back, we did a series entitled Dream Job, where we got the chance to really navigate what is our dream job? What do we want to do? Like, how do we turn our day job into our dream job? How do we live a life of purpose and meaning? And I can't tell you how many different people, they were rewatching, they were asking for notes, they were digging into that series, because when we begin to ask this question, it begins to be a very difficult question for so many of us. Because we find ourselves in a steady job, but a job that maybe doesn't necessarily provide purpose or meaning. You know, Tom Sawyer. Mark Twain one time made the statement. He created Tom Sawyer. Anyway, he made the statement. He said that there's the two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you figured out why. Isn't there such truth to that? For me, the who I am, when I really begin to answer that question, I've been in a couple different counseling scenarios where, especially when we began the process of trying to plant a church, there was an organization that we walked with and walked through, and they wanted to make sure that I have the chops, I guess you could say, to plant a church, because apparently it's hard work, and I would say it is. But I went through several different counseling experiences, and one of the things that they continue to ask is this question of, who are you? Like, really, who are you? And one of the things I kept going to is, well, I'm a husband. I've got an awesome wife. I'm a father. And at the time, I've got one child, and you know, I could stand beside my wife and be like, and I've got one on the way, right? Like, we had Stephen, and he was still in diapers and still young and still very young. They're 15 months apart, and so we're crazy. You're right. We love it that way, kind of, most days. But they would ask the question, who are you? And I remember trying to think through, and I'm a pastor. At the time, I was a student pastor. Who are you? I'm an Aggie. I love to run, but I miss running. I'm just being honest, right? And you begin to answer these questions. You begin to put identities around who you are. And the list continued to go on because they kept asking, no, really, who are you? Keep going, keep going. And I'm like, I really don't know what else to say. Like, who am I am a Texan, right? I'm an American. Like, you just start going like, what? How do I define this question? And so what I want to do for a second is I want to let you answer the question as well. So here's what I'm going to do, just for a few minutes, a few moments. I want you just to find the people around you. And I want you to answer this question right here to them. Who are you? You tell the people around you who you are. Go. I think I heard some good conversations. I heard some good laughter. So, here, I'll answer the question for you. Who am I? I mean, I put down here, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a pastor.
You should leave that last part out.
I'm an Aggie, even when we lose. By the way, I wore black today in honor of my Aggies and Longhorn friends. We are mourning today. But my question is this. Who are you? Somebody tell me, who are you? Somebody give me an answer.
Buckeye.
Okay, a Buckeye. We'll put Buckeye instead of Aggie back there. I'm a Buckeye. Somebody else, who are you?
I'm a character.
A character.
Oh, yeah.
And the crowd goes, oh yeah. Who else? Somebody else, who are you? Huh?
Weather nerd.
A weather nerd. Is it WHETHER or WEA? We got it. What else?
Grandpa.
What now? Child of God. Okay. What else?
Grandpa.
A grandpa. A friend. I'm going to slow down. Make sure you got them all. Child of God. 3 words. Space. Grandpa. And a friend. And a mother. Okay. Well, we'll put grandpa and grandma. Well, there's so many different things we could be, right? I mean, you look in this room, and there's so many different aspects that we could be. I mean, you could take Buckeye and you could put Red Raider. You could take Buckeye and you could put Cowboy fan. Apparently, the Cowboys are going to play today, and there's a running back that's back. Okay, like this is exciting, right? But when you begin to look at this list, right? You begin to look at different identities and different ideas. You begin to look at things that define you. Isn't it true that oftentimes what we do defines who you are? That what we do, we talked about this in the Dream Job series, that so many times you as a child, you're asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's always, I want to be a fireman, right? I want to be a policeman. I want to be a trash man. My boys love the trash man. It's awesome, right? Like, I'm telling you, the other day, Labor Day, the trash man still came in Fort Worth, and it was cool that our trash guy's on Monday. And we heard trash guy number 1. So we've got 3. We've got trash, recycle, and then the grass clippings guy, okay? So my boys are in heaven on Mondays. And so Labor Day, like really, we heard number 1 come by, and what did we do? The boys and I walked down the street, and we followed the stench of the trash can. All the way to the cul-de-sac. And then he came back. And we kept following him. Isn't that cool? I mean, there's a guy that's jumping on the back of this truck and he's riding it. But isn't it true that what we do oftentimes defines who you are? When somebody asks, hey, what do you do? Who are you? When you're in a party, a social setting, oftentimes this is the question. This is where we go. This is where we turn. It becomes about who we are. It becomes about our job. And we never really answer the question of what we want to be. It's always what we do. So when you look at this, I mean, these are things we listed. It's a husband, it's a father, right? Your profession, teachers. I heard retired over here. That's the profession we all want to have, right? Like, Andrew Luck retired at the age of 29. I'm like, dude, that is awesome. But we listed things that we are, things that we do on a regular basis. Another way of defining this would be to say that this is our identity, essentially. I mean, for so many of us, what we do becomes our identity. It becomes what we talk about every single day. When we are talking to different people, when we're meeting new people, we oftentimes identify ourselves by what we do. But let me ask you this. What happens when things go awry? What happens when your Aggies lose? Right? Well, make it even more pointed. Like, what happens when, as a friend, a relationship is broken? What happens when, as a parent, your kids move off and you become an empty nester? What happens, heaven forbid, something were to happen to your kids? What happens when you're a husband and the relationship that you're in, it just dissolves and all of a sudden you're trying to hold on to this, I'm a husband, but also you're looking at the title and you're saying, that doesn't define me anymore. Like, I want to be that, but what happens when these items, they go by the wayside? What happens when we have our identity in our job and you get the pink slip? And all of a sudden, the job that you had, it's no longer the job that you have. What do we do? What happens when our identity goes? When the things that we do go, oftentimes our identity goes. And here's what I found, is when what we do defines who we are, our identity becomes circumstantial, fearful, and fragile. It becomes circumstantial, like you're a husband, a father, the position that you have is circumstantial based upon how things are going. You're fearful. For me personally, if I can be honest, there's a tension. Because as a pastor, I'm just going to play my cards. I'm not great at life. But as a pastor, there's oftentimes these conversations, when pastors get together, and it's like, hey, what are you doing new? What are you trying? What's going on? And at times we can be fearful of trying new things because our identity is oftentimes found in our successes. And we want to be known as a winner. And when losing is an option, at times we'll get fearful and we'll push back because we don't want to be identified as a loser. So oftentimes our identity becomes fearful because we don't want to take risks, we don't want to take chances because we don't want to be defined as a loser. We want to take calculated risks that we know we can win. Because as our identity goes, so goes, as what we do goes, so goes our identity. It's circumstantial, it's fearful, and can it be fragile too? When you think about the things on this list, when you think about what makes you excited, when you think about the things in your life that are going right, at times it can be a little fragile because at times our identity is based upon social media. It's based upon what can get the most likes, what can get the most feedback, what can get the most people to comment on my stuff. And so you begin to constantly look at social media. You constantly look at things that begin to give you your identity. And you're finding your identity in what you do. You're finding your identity in things that are completely not what you should be finding your identity in. And for me, whether I intended to or not, what I am, who I am, is wrapped up in what I do. I mean, so many times, Doyle and I, we laugh about it. Monday morning, it's like, like, was Sunday a good day? Yeah! Like, oh my goodness, what happened? For me, there's so much in, like, I leave Sunday mornings and I'm like, oh, was that a good message? I hope it went well. I hope it went well. Like, I hope people, like, listened. I hope they were leaning in. I hope they were sitting on the edge of their seat. I hope, man, God changed their life. Like, it becomes all about a performance and not about what I am. My identity becomes defined by what I do. The size of my church, the messages. If I end at 11:05 or not. I mean, for real. That's a challenge. You know it. Not today. But when what we do defines who we are, our identity is circumstantial, it's fearful, and it's fragile. And what I ended up finding is what I did defined who I was. And what I did defined who I was. And for me, as I was in these different conversations, especially getting ready to plant a church, one of the things that they kept driving at is regardless of what happens, and this is probably true for you as well, regardless of what happens, we begin to get addicted to our successes. We begin to get addicted to the things that go right in our life. And when we get addicted to our successes, we begin to be defined by what we do. And then when things go awry, all of a sudden we begin to get fearful and frustrated. And we begin to try to figure out how do we make sense of life. Now today, what we're going to do is we're going to take a left turn because there's an individual in the course of the New Testament. His name is Paul. Paul's an individual that if we were to really wrap our minds around what Paul did, Paul was, he did everything to the finest. I mean, Paul was an individual that he did everything right. Paul was the guy that when it came to being the best, his resume showed it. When it came to respect, I mean, the individuals, the people of the Jewish tradition, the religious leaders, the political leaders of that day, they respected him because he did everything right. And yet Paul, after having a life-changing experience, he comes to this understanding, to this reality that there's more to life than what I do. In fact, Paul, when he's writing the church of Philippi, he basically gives us his resume, which is pretty fascinating. And we're going to pick it up in Philippians chapter 3. He says this, though I could have confidence in my own effort. In other words, I am it. I can do anything. I could have so much confidence in everything I've been able to touch because everything I've been able to touch turns to gold. Though I could have confidence in my own effort, if anyone could... Indeed, if others have reason for confidence in their efforts, I have more. If you think you've done good, I'm better. That's what Paul is saying right here. I can have confidence in what I've done, and if you think you're good, watch out. I can have more confidence than you. Why? Well, he continues, and he explains it. He says, I was circumcised when I was 8 days old. I am a pure-blooded citizen of Israel and a member of the tribe of Benjamin, a real Hebrew if there ever was one. In other words, when it comes to Jewish traditions, you can't get any more Jew than me. When it comes to what it looks like to be a Jewish person in this day and age, when it comes to what the prophet, what the priest, and what the political leaders are looking for, this is the resume they want. And he continues on. He says this, I was a member of the Pharisees, the political leaders, that's the Sadducees. The Pharisees were the religious leaders of the day, who demand the strictest obedience to the Jewish law. I was so zealous that I harshly persecuted the church. In fact, if you're in here today and you don't like Christians, I want to let you know that you're going to be in good company with Paul. Paul was an individual that he saw the followers of Jesus as a direct affront at what the Jewish religious tradition was all about. And so he harshly persecuted the church, wanting to clean it up and rid it of all Jesus' followers. And he thought he was doing a good thing. And he continues on and he says this, and as for righteousness, I obeyed the law without fault. When it comes to being good enough, I was good enough. When it came to following the law, I did it to a T. You're supposed to not go within 10 yards of that idol right there. I didn't go within 12 yards. What's up? My name's Paul. Drop the mic. As for righteousness, I obeyed the law without fault. Knowing all that, here's what Paul says. I once thought these things were valuable, but now I consider them worthless because of what Christ has done. I once thought that the things that I do are valuable, but I consider them worthless because of what Christ has done for me. What has Christ done for us? I mean, as a follower of Jesus, I believe that Jesus Christ died on the cross for our sins. That for me, for you, that we can constantly be running this rat race of trying to be good enough, of do good enough. We can constantly be running this rat race of trying to get everything we can to the best level we can to present it to God or our neighbors or our friends. And Paul's saying, I once thought that being good enough was valuable. In fact, I was so good enough that I was more good enough than anybody was good enough. I was the preeminent good enough. He said, but everything that I consider valuable, I now consider them worthless because of what Christ has done. It's fascinating. In just about every single letter, Paul, who he believed that the law was a valuable thing before he encountered Jesus. In just about every single letter that Paul wrote, he wrote about this idea of being free. Because he knew that the law had its boundaries. He knew that so many times as a follower of the Jewish law that we would put ourselves under the law, and the law became this sticky point. It became this oppressor. And Paul wanted people to know that there is freedom that's found in Jesus Christ. There's freedom that's found in what Jesus has done for us. And so he continues in Galatians. He writes this, the church of Galatia. He's like, hey, here we go. Let me put it another way. In other words, I've been telling everybody this, but let me rephrase it for you a little bit. The law was our guardian until Christ came. It protected us until we could be made right with God through faith. The law was there to protect you, so you wanted to be good enough. You wanted to do everything you can, but there's a new way. There's a better way. There's a better option than trying to just be good enough. Paul's saying there's something better than this. Before Jesus, you needed the law to be made right. Before Jesus, you needed the sacrificial system. Before Jesus, you needed these things to be able to be in your life to make you right with God. And Paul's saying, I used to be all about that. And I used to believe it to be true. That you needed the law to make one right. So it became all about what I do. It became all about me being good enough. See, before Jesus was there, it was all about being made right through the law. So Paul, if it's not about being made right through the law, then what is it? Paul, I would ask the question. I mean, so Paul, what should we do? How do we do this? Where do we go from here? And he says this in 25. He says, and now that the way of faith has come, we no longer need the law as our guardian. We don't need it. We don't need to try to be good enough. We don't need to try to be great enough for God to love us. We don't need to be good enough. So if we don't, Paul, who are we? I would ask the question. So if we don't need the law, who are we, Paul? Where's our identity need to be staked? If it's not about me being good enough, then where does my identity need to be? Well, Paul answers the question. It says, for you are all children of God through faith. To which I would put up here, child of God. When you begin to think about who you are, when you begin to think about what you do, so many times our identity is defined in who you are, but it's bigger than that. Because when the things on this right side of the list, your left, my right, when the things over here begin to define us, it begins to be circumstantial, fragile, and fearful. And there's got to be a better way. And Paul says there is a better way. And it's greater than what you do. It's whose you are. And Paul would say that you're a child of God. Now, I have a 4-year-old and 3-year-old. You probably know that. But a 4-year-old and 3-year-old are kind of crazy. But I'll be honest with you. Yesterday, they ran upstairs in the middle of the Aggie football game. And I knew that there were napping people upstairs. And I had two options. I either pause the game and go get them, or I don't pause the game and I watch the game and I let them just wreak havoc upstairs. And I weighed the options and I watched the game. No, I'm just kidding. weighed the options, and I ran upstairs like, guys, what are you doing? Come downstairs. We're missing a good game at this point, not later. But there's really nothing that my kids can do that would ever make me stop loving them. There's nothing as a father, when I look at these boys, there's nothing that they could ever do that could make me stop loving them. And I know they're going to do imperfect things. I know they're going to do bonehead things because they're probably a lot like their father. But as a parent, when you look at your kids, there is this unconditional love that is showered out upon your kids. There's this idea that I know that there's going to be bonehead decisions that they do. I know there's going to be things that I disagree with. But honestly, there's always going to be that moment that if they want to come back, I'm going to have my arms open and I'm going to accept them and I'm going to love them and I'm going to welcome them with open arms. That their love, that my love for them is not based upon what they're going to do for me, but my love for them is based upon the fact that they are mine. So as a child of God, there's attributes that come with that. There's things that we get to celebrate and live with it. In fact, as a child of God, we are free. Which you think about it, we talk about this idea of being free oftentimes. Because so many times in our world today that the version of Christianity that was presented to people by and large is not a version of freedom, but it's a version of oppression and do. And Paul's saying it's not about what you do, there's freedom. You are a child of God, that as a child of God, there's freedom, that you are seen as righteous. Not like, righteous, there's this righteous reality to you. That when it comes to your life, and I know you could look in the mirror and say, yeah, but you don't understand. There's no way that God could love me because of... All of a sudden we become righteous. Paul would later say that you are a new creation in Christ. The old is gone and the new has come. That in Jesus Christ that you can have identity. Your identity can be found in something brand new. In fact, I would say something whole, complete, not lacking anything. There's this word up here, saint. Paul would call us a saint. As a child of God, we get to wear the mantle of a saint. Now, if you come from a Catholic background, or if you grew up in a Catholic church, oftentimes this word is reserved for just the preeminent followers of Jesus, the early church fathers, and to even begin to say that I could have the same kind of standing as Matthew and Luke and Paul. But the same way God looks at those individuals, God looks at you. The same way that God holds up and values the early church fathers, God looks at you the same way, with the same respect and with the same love. That you're loved and you're treasured. When I think of treasured, I think of Santa Claus, and I think of Christmas morning, and I think of coming running down and looking, and underneath the tree there's gifts, and it's like, woohoo, right? But imagine the idea that David would write of having a relationship with God, that God's mercies are new every single morning. As a child of God, we don't have to be wrapped up in the things that we've done. We get to enjoy the freedom, the unconditional love. We get to enjoy these new mercies every single day. But the challenge is that oftentimes who we are is on the right side. This is what defines who we are, and it becomes very circumstantial, becomes very fearful and fragile. So I have a question. So what should we do with this? Like, how do we make sense of all this? I believe there's a connection between the two. I believe there's a connection between what we do and who we are. And the connection is this. I believe that as a child of God, it should inform what we do. As a child of God, it should inform the decisions we make. As a child of God, it should inform how we parent. It should inform how we love our spouse. It should inform the way we go about our daily tasks. It should inform the way I treat the TV when the Aggies are losing. Because I'm loved. And so are they. Scoreboard didn't show it. But that's okay. You see, for us, when we begin to look at this transition, right? Who we are as a child of God should inform what we do. When who we are in God's standing informs what we do, when we find ourselves in the empty nest syndrome and we're trying to figure out how do we make sense of life, we don't have kids anymore, it changes the way we do because we know that we are loved and valued. We know that we're treasured, that the mercies are new every morning. When it comes to how we are a husband, when it comes to how we are a wife, when it comes to the things of a marital relationship, when we allow the things of the left, when we allow the unconditional love to inform the way we love our spouse, it changes the way we talk to them. It changes the way we treat them. It changes the things we say to them. When we allow the idea that I'm a child of God, when we allow that reality to inform the way we work, you begin to treat your coworkers different. You begin to see life differently. You're not trying to cut corners to get ahead. You're really sitting back and you're saying, you know what, I want us both to succeed. When you allow your identity to be found in Christ, you can take chances. You can begin to do things with your life that you never thought were possible because you know that you were loved and you were whole and that you were valuable. So I want to ask you the question, a simple question. Who are you? Who are you? And to kind of tease that out, I want to ask you specifically about your relationship with Jesus. When it comes to your relationship with Jesus, do you know Jesus or do you just know about Jesus? When it comes to your relationship with Jesus, when it comes to you having your identity, do you know a lot about Jesus or do you just know about Jesus? Because when we ground our identity in that, it changes the ballgame. It changes our reality. It changes who we become.